Hi, and welcome to this presentation of Tackling Your Taxes, where Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid's Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic talks about a tax topic applicable to low-income and English as a second language taxpayers. So this week, we have myself, Aisha Servaty. I'm the director of the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic, and joining me is Grace Edwards, who is a law clerk with the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. And so Grace is going to be leading the presentation, and our topic is tax return preparer fraud. So I will turn it over to Grace.
Awesome. Thanks, Aisha. I'm excited to talk a little bit about tax return preparer fraud and how you can protect yourself from this kind of fraud and make sure your taxes are good to go when you file them. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So what does tax preparer fraud look like? A lot of different things. A fraudulent return preparer might file an individual 1040 return without your knowledge or consent, like they could just do it without you if they have some information about you. They could alter your tax return documents. They could misdirect your refund into their own account or somewhere else. And then they could do any number of things to generate a larger refund, like using an incorrect filing status, creating false exemptions or dependents, making up income or leaving out income that you've earned to get a larger refund. And creating false expenses, deductions, or credits. And typically they'll find a way to do one of these things to generate a larger refund and then tell you that because of that, you should pay them more or pay them a percent of your refund. So we can keep going. Another term that the IRS has coined is ghost preparers. And these are tax return preparers who encourage you to claim these things that you don't qualify for. And they charge the large percentage fee, or they somehow steal your whole refund, and then they disappear. So they leave you to deal with the consequences when the IRS eventually reaches out and says that the thing you claimed was incorrect and that you actually owe money. So the ghost preparers, they don't stick around to help you with that. Closely related to this tax return preparer fraud is identity theft. So tax-related identity theft occurs when someone uses a stolen social security number to file a tax return claiming a fraudulent refund. In general, people can also use your social security number to open new credit lines, to make unauthorized purchases, to get fake identification, just lots of ways to kind of mess with your life if somebody gets a hold of your social security number. And don't want to be overly alarmist. Tax professionals with valid credentials can be trusted with your social security number. But generally, it's important to always be aware that you should be careful about who you give this information to, especially when you're filing your taxes. Okay, so now I want to shift more into how you can protect yourself from this kind of fraud. Some things to look out for: preparers who will not sign your return with their name and their preparer tax identification number. They should have this. They have to have a preparer tax identification number, and if they don't sign their name, then that's a big red flag. Also, if they're promising a too good to be true refund, if you filed taxes in past years and you've never gotten anything like what they're claiming to be able to get you, then maybe there are some red flags there if your situation hasn't changed much from previous years. Also, if preparers promise you a bigger refund without knowing anything about your situation, they don't know how they can actually get that for you. So that's also a red flag. Also, if they prepare a return that reports credits or deductions you don't understand. Taxes are obviously confusing, and there may be credits and deductions that you don't know about and that you don't immediately understand. So this doesn't automatically mean that there's fraud happening. But in general, it's a good idea to get an idea. Do your research, maybe ask them questions if there's a credit or a deduction that you don't understand. And if you still don't understand after they explain it or after you do some research, then that might be a red flag. Also, preparers who do not have an established business. Again, there are people who are qualified who might not have like a super formal business with a building and everything, but in general, that is something that should also kind of raise your attention a little bit. So not always signs that a preparer is engaged in misconduct or fraud, but they should get your attention. Okay, so a couple ways to protect yourself. Always review your completed tax return before allowing the preparer to file it. And kind of going along with that, never sign a blank tax return, because that would allow, a preparer to go in afterwards and put in incorrect details to claim a fraudulent refund. Never have any portion of your refund direct deposited into an account under the preparer's control. Your refund should be issued to you as a check or direct deposited into your account. It should not go through somebody else because there's no guarantee that they will then give it to you. Always get a complete copy of your return for your records. This, again, goes along with that first tip, which it's always a good idea to review your tax return, not just kind of blindly trust the person who's preparing it. And also having a complete copy is useful when, if the IRS reaches out to you and says that there are issues with your tax return, having that information, and especially having what the person who prepared it gave to you is useful when you're dealing with the IRS. And then also choosing a reputable tax preparer. So we can go into that a little bit more on the next slide. So checking a preparer's credentials is a great first step to choosing a tax preparer. The IRS has a directory of federal tax return preparers with credentials and select qualifications. There are definitely different kind of tiers of credentials. You don't have to have like the highest certification in order to get a preparer identification number. That is definitely like the minimum thing that you should look for. But beyond that, you can do some research about the credentials that are that the IRS accepts, that the IRS kind of values, and that will tell you if somebody is more trustworthy generally. Also, if you are under a certain income threshold, if you have a disability or English as a second language, you can get free help with tax filing through the Volunteer Income Tax Assistant Program through the IRS. And the IRS has on their website a directory of locations where you can have VITA assistance. If you are in the Twin Cities, commonly our clients, people we work with, go to Prepare and Prosper, and they can help you do your tax returns for free. And the Minnesota Department of Revenue website also has resources on locating these sites. Okay, so now what to do if you suspect you are a victim of tax return preparer fraud. Looks like the formatting got a little messed up. You may be a victim of preparer fraud if you get a notice from the IRS saying there's a mistake in your tax return or that you've falsely claimed something. There are so many reasons that you can get mail from the IRS. So this doesn't automatically mean that the person who helped you file lied or was involved in misconduct. It doesn't necessarily mean that, but you always should try to get to the bottom of it when you get a notice from the IRS, especially if it says that you owe money. So that's the first step. And the Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic is just one place that can help you if you get a notice that you don't understand, if you need assistance figuring out a variety of things about your tax situation. So we help taxpayers who have low income, if you're under 250% of the federal poverty guidelines, as well as taxpayers who speak English as a second language. We can help with issues including identity theft, things relating to the U.S. tax court, tax settlements if you agree that you owe the IRS but you can't afford to pay, if your wages are being garnished, if you're being audited by the IRS. These are all things we can help with. And so if you get a notice, you don't know how to deal with it, how to approach it, you can call the MMLA intake line, which I believe the number is on the last slide of this presentation. Okay, and to report tax return preparer fraud or misconduct, the IRS form you would file is a 14157A, tax return preparer fraud or misconduct affidavit. And you also file form 14157 complaint, tax return preparer, complaint, tax return preparer. All these titles, they're kind of the same. And when you do this, include a copy of the notice you've received from the IRS and any supporting documentation, any information about the person who prepared your taxes. If you have communications with them that show that maybe they disappeared on you, did the ghost preparer maneuver, or maybe refused to give you your records back. Any supporting evidence that you have, you would just attach to these forms. And if your tax return or refund has not been affected, but you still suspect that the person who helped you do your taxes was involved in improper preparation practices, you can still report it. You still report them. So examples of this situation, if they failed to use the preparer tax identification number, or they use somebody else's on your return, if they refuse to provide you with a copy of your tax return, or refuse to give you your original documents back, that's not allowed. They also cannot withhold your original documents until you pay them for their services. That's something you can complain to the IRS about if you find out they lied about their credentials. And then also if they prepared your returns using tax software that's intended for use by individuals. So off-the-shelf tax software or IRS free file, these are intended to be used by individuals, and people are not allowed to charge you money to assist you with those. And if you're a victim of monetary or identity theft, whether related to your tax preparer or just in general, stop interacting with the scammer. Don't send any more money or personal information. Contact your financial institutions, and also follow the steps on identitytheft.gov. So the government has kind of a specific website to go to in that situation. And if your social security number or your individual taxpayer identification number was stolen, also report it to identitytheft.gov, and also report it to the IRS and your state tax agency. So in Minnesota, that is the Minnesota Department of Revenue. Okay, just a couple final helpful resources. The Taxpayer Advocate Service is an independent organization under the IRS that advocates for taxpayers, and they have a lot of really great resources on their website on tax return preparer fraud, as well as lots of other subjects. The IRS also has helpful information about choosing a tax professional. They have that directory of credentials that I mentioned earlier. The Dirty Dozen tax scams is something that the IRS does every year, because the way that scammers are scamming people changes year to year. Like new scams kind of emerge over time. And the IRS kind of keeps track of what shows up frequently. So that's kind of an interesting read, and good to look out for if you're worried about tax scams from your tax return preparer. And then the last link here is Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid. So you can always call our intake number if you have tax issues, and we can see if we can assist you as the low-income taxpayer clinic. So that is all. This is our intake line if you do want to call Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid. And I don't know if we have any questions.
We don't have any questions right now, so we'll just wait about a minute to see if any come through. But thank you so much, Grace.
Oh, yeah. Thank
you. That was a great presentation and a lot of information. So this live will be available on Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid's Facebook page as well as YouTube page. So you can always go back and watch it. If you have any questions, you can always make a comment and we will respond to those as soon as we can. I don't see any questions though, so thank you so much for coming to our presentation. And we will be having 2 more tackling your taxes over the next 2 weeks, so Monday at noon. So those topics will be claiming a dependent on your tax return and then requesting collection suspension. So thank you again, Grace, and thank you everyone for coming, and we will see you next week.